Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Happy New Year and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports from our state-of-the-art Pontchartrain Production Studios. I'm Eric Asher. I'm your host over the next hour. We'll talk all about the home teams, the New Orleans Saints, the LSU Tigers, the Tulane Green Wave. We'll talk a bit about what's going on with Antonio Brown, also Drew Brees, and we'll get into some other things as well. Break it down for us tonight as our first show of 2020. None other than Larry Holder of The Athletic. Larry, welcome to the show. As always, good to have you, my friend.
I mean, it's so bright in here. It's the first thing I said when I talked to everyone when I walked in here. I was like, wow, it's like a new day. And I know you've been in here for a while, but it's my first time getting in here. So I'm like, I need sunglasses, or it's just like, it's like different. It's happy.
It's different than the other two studios we had. And we're hoping to make it a little bit more, even more different as we go forward. But, I mean, again, you look at, with the ability to look at the skyline, look at the dome. Of course, we have all the memorabilia behind us. But, it is rather bright in here, no doubt about that. But it is a great studio, and it's really been a great upgrade for us here at WLAE, no doubt about that.
Sure seems that way, and it's kind of bizarre to see. I know next door is where the old Picayune, my old stomping grounds were. But no, look, obviously exciting times here in New Orleans. You can't walk anywhere without someone either talking about the Saints or talking about LSU, given this is combined. It really has similarities to 2011. Saints 13-3, having to be a 3 seed. LSU in the national championship game, playing in New Orleans. Weird symmetry. Maybe things turn out differently for both teams this time around.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. No doubt about that. Before we get started, you're with The Athletic now. For folks that don't know, why don't you tell the folks about The Athletic? I hype it all. You're with me every Thursday on my radio show. We hype it there. And I'll just tell folks right now, if you love sports, not just local sports, because they got a great contingent of reporters on a local level, but national. Again, some of the best writers in the nation, some of the best writers in the world. Even we're talking soccer as well. You got to subscribe to The Athletic. Tell us about it.
Right. We're going global. It's been pretty remarkable. But look, theathletic.com/New Orleans is the local site. Myself, Jeff Duncan, Catherine Terrell, Brody Miller covering LSU, Will Guillory covering the Pelicans, and we give you in-depth coverage. It's not these little quick hitters. It's more in-depth coverage. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to have a pretty in-depth piece on Drew Brees and the differences between last year at this time and this year at this time, and comparing him to the playoff quarterbacks that are entering this weekend as well. So we'll have that. I also have a column up about LSU's defense, how they're peaking at the right time. I'm kind of jack of trades of everything. We also do the Duncan Holder podcast, which of course we used to be on radio together. And look, even an event I was telling you about that's coming up, it's going to be on January 11th. Doors open at noon. It is Andy Staples, Bruce Feldman, Stuart Mandel, the top college football writers in America. We're going to be hosting an event at House of Blues. Tickets are $10. You come, they're doing live shows there, big party. It's pretty remarkable to think about, wow, okay, The Athletic's holding an event at House of Blues for the college football championship game. But that's how we do it, locally, nationally, internationally, all there at The Athletic.
And always growing, too, and that's the other part of it. I'll get, an email or something telling me about a new writer that's coming on board, and it's a familiar name, somebody you know, somebody you've read or you've seen on TV or heard on the radio. So again, I highly recommend to anybody that loves sports. You got to check out The Athletic. You mentioned the Saints, 13-3, 42-10 winners over Carolina. They are the third seed now. in the tournament. They have to be playing wild card weekend. They're taking on the Vikings in the Dome on Sunday, 12:05. If they win that game, they'll be traveling up to the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field to play the Green Bay Packers next Sunday. That is a 5:40 kickoff. So again, that'll be in the evening time. No word on what the weather's going to be like now, but a lot of people have talked about it over the last few weeks. And again, I go back to the Atlanta game that they lost. Even Lattimore was talking about, the two games that really kind of got away from them. When you talk about the situation with San Francisco, I think you got to throw the Los Angeles Rams loss out because of what happened with Breeze going down. And then, of course, I think they still could have won that game if Cameron Jordan's touchdown doesn't get called back as well. But do you prescribe to any of this? Look, you didn't come out, you didn't play against the Falcons. That ended up costing you, or is this just the way it is in football?
I think it's a little of both. You shouldn't have lost to the Falcons. The 49ers was a toss-up game. We knew the Rams game would be tough. But let's be honest, the fact that the Saints are actually 13-3, when you look at the grand scope, if you're not happy with that, regardless of where you ended up 1, 2, and 3, you're out of your mind. Drew Brees goes down. Do we really think that they're going to be 13-3? No chance. Teddy Bridgewater held the seat for Drew Brees. And you look at it, and this is going to be part of my article tomorrow, the 5 games that Drew Brees sat, it allowed him not to take 5 weeks of being beat up in the NFL. Sure, he had to heal his thumb, and that was a big part of it. But he's as fresh or fresher than the quarterbacks going in. And the fact that you had this sort of team effort with Teddy guiding the offense, the defense playing well, the run game moving. I mean, Latavius Murray was a 2-game wonder in that part of it. The fact that you're 13-3 and you're going to be hosting a playoff game and you're playing better than the Packers. You're playing maybe the other team in the NFC's, the 49ers that you have to worry about. But the only thing about being a 3 seed is you just don't have the week off. Right. At least for the Saints, the fact that they were able to slide the starters out because Carolina didn't even show up.
True.
That helped, I think, in terms of that as well. And so I think the Saints, they're as dangerous as anyone in the NFL, not just the NFC.
There are 2 schools of thought here. The first school of thought is you wanted to get the first round bye, give you some home field advantage, obviously going forward, but allow the players to be able to rest up, those that are injured, trying to get those guys back. The other part of it is you're playing pretty darn good football right now, and you might want to be able to stay, again, playing week to week. Where do you stand on that?
I think it's, and judging by the injury report as of today, the only people who didn't practice were Eli Apple and Zach Line. Everyone else was full participation. So they are healthy.
Right.
Well, healthy enough for right now. And so why not get another win under your belt? Just keep that train rolling. And it's not like Green Bay has been really knocking the socks off of anyone, really. And so you go into that game, I don't think the cold matters. Yes, the Packers have to play in the cold. They don't enjoy it. Like, I think that's going to be a little overrated.
And this is a different Saints team, right? A team that honestly can play on the road and win.
Absolutely. And they've done it. They've shown it the last 3 years, really. And so I don't think the venue matters. I don't think who they play really matters. I think they could go in and beat anyone. Like I said, I would say of the top teams in the NFL, I would probably have to put in a cluster. I'd say the 49ers, the Saints, I'd throw the Chiefs in, and I'd say the Ravens too. I think the Patriots are shaky. I think everyone else in the AFC is shaky. So I would say those are your top 4, with the Patriots kind of on the outskirts of that.
I agree with you, and I talked about it a little bit on today's program, on today's radio show. If you look at where the Saints are right now, and I'm just trying to look at it, realistically, how this team has been playing down the stretch, offense and defense, and again, how they performed against San Francisco at home, a game they should have won. I think the only team that can beat the Saints in the NFC is the Saints at this point. And I wouldn't have said that maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, having to travel to Green Bay for a night game in early January. That, again, that may affect them. But I think they are good enough on defense, and they are peaking now on defense. And, of course, the offense continue to put up big-time numbers, and they have the ability to run the football. So, I think if they have to go to Santa Clara, I don't think it's a big deal for them at this point because I think they know they can play with the 49ers, and they should have beat the 49ers, except for obviously some bonehead plays down the line. I think they're the best team in the NFC, and if you want, I agree with you about that cluster in the AFC. You can talk about Baltimore, you talk about Kansas City. The Saints would be a great matchup for either one of those.
Yeah, and you think of just when they played the 49ers, they didn't have their full complement of linebackers. True. They were scrambling there. I think that affected them stopping the run. And honestly, I think the secondary is improved by adding Janoris Jenkins. I mean, we're seeing Patrick Robinson play fine.
No doubt.
And it just seems different now than it was then. And I think, look, are they a good team? Yes. And did we know it could be a back-and-forth type of game? Yes. I thought it might have been low scoring, but it was high scoring. And if they get back to that point, I think the Saints can win in any type of matchup. But I also feel like the Saints offensively, you kind of forget that they scored 46 points because they lost.
Right.
But their offense, that was one of the kind of springboards. They've been playing great offensively the rest of the way, and they're only getting better offensively and getting a little healthier along the offensive line. Kamara's playing great. Jared Cook is as advertised now. Taysom Hill, like all these pieces are there, and Drew Brees is not limping in the playoffs. People think he had the noodle arm last year.
Right.
Well, guess what? What do you say now? He's been incredible. He was the player of the month offensively in the NFC. They are way more equipped, I even feel like this time, than they were a year ago. They're more equipped now to go and make a run, even though we all know they should have at least made the Super Bowl last year.
No doubt. To your point about Brees, was it 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in the month of December?
15.
It was 15 touchdowns?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other part, I did the research on this one. 30 to 40 points has been the norm for this team. They scored 30 or more points in 11 games this season, including 6 of the last 7. So that tells you how this offense is rolling on all cylinders. And they did some of that with Teddy Bridgewater, but most of that has been under Drew Brees.
Right. And it didn't take long for Brees to kind of get back into a comfort zone. But I do think it was getting some of these pieces totally in. Look, Alvin Kamara, we know he's been struggling. Jared Cook had an ankle injury, concussion, didn't seem like people were calling him a bust after, say, the first 5 or 6 games. And I'm like, hold off. And then all of a sudden, he is the complementary piece you need for this offense. And, Eric, you could go look back at last year. They're scrambling at wide receiver. Des Bryant, Brandon Marshall. True. They're praying that Ted Ginn comes back. You're leaning on Keith Kirkwood. These people are not even being discussed at this point because Michael Thomas has been great. Jared Cook. Taysom Hill has been playing well. Even Traquan Smith becoming more consistent and more involved. And so you add all of that up, and they're on the right trajectory as opposed to, wow, they got in, but they were kind of limping a little bit down the stretch last year.
Yeah, they're not limping at all. And they've had a really, they've had a great season, especially on both sides of the ball. Let's talk about the offensive side. The offensive line only giving up 12 sacks the entire season. And you're talking about losing offensive linemen throughout the season. That is huge for this offensive line, and again, shows you the quality depth they have along the offensive line as well.
Yeah, I didn't think Nick Easton would come in and play as well. I thought that might have been trouble, but he's filled in admirably. And the Saints, I know they weren't impressed with him by the end of training camp, maybe even thought about letting him go. Good thing they didn't for their sake. And he's stepped in and played well for Andres Pete. Teron Armstead, I know he's fought through the high ankle sprain. He only missed 1 game, but he was hell-bent to play, and he's still playing at a Pro Bowl level. Ryan Ramczyk is Ryan Ramczyk. And I mentioned this on the radio show with you today. I think the big key has been Eric McCoy, because even Max Unger admitted last year that he felt his play was slipping, and it was so much so where it was never going to return. And he said, look, I'm not going to be a detriment. I'm going to retire. And Eric McCoy has been there every step of the way. He's protected up the middle and been a big asset. And look, Larry Warford, I know he missed a game with the knee injury, but he only missed 1.
Right.
And he's always been as solid as a rock there too. But McCoy, I feel like, has been a big, big piece to where Drew Brees is not having to feel the heat up the middle.
Right.
And an upgrade from last year to this year from Unger, because Unger's played so well for so long,
yeah.
but it was falling off for him.
No doubt. And then the other part of it, again, that I think everybody kind of overlooked this throughout the season. It became a big story within the last week. 8 turnovers, 6 interceptions, 2 fumbles. I mean, that's incredible for an offense, especially an offense that, again, is throwing the ball as much as the Saints are, the type of offense they are. Plus 15 in the takeaway giveaway stat. That's second in the NFL. It's not what happened in 2009 with the 39 turnovers and the 8 defensive touchdowns that I remember back then that we were talking about. But this defense created 23 turnovers, 13 interceptions, 10 fumble recoveries. You look at what they're doing on that giveaway takeaway, that's winning football.
Well, it's reminiscent of 09 just because of the numbers so high,
yes.
But it's a little different strategy. The Saints are taking care of the football better. Defense isn't exactly creating as many takeaways, but still, they're able to get the job done.
Right.
I mean, they're putting pressure on quarterbacks, and they're doing what they need to do and making stops. And so it really is, in that sense, reminiscent. Now, you're wondering, I mean, is someone going to make a big play? Like, you're assuming almost, say, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, if he's in there, he's a playmaker.
Yeah.
Or someone like Marshawn Lattimore is going to come up with a pick. Or Janoris Jenkins, I mean, he had a pick last week. His 5th of the year. People don't even realize it's not like the Giants cut him because he was a diminishing player.
Right.
I think both sides had enough of each other. And so he's got to play. I think he's just got to play.
I agree with you. I don't know how Eli Apple could come in and move him out. I understand that maybe they could do more things with Apple, but at this point, from a veteran standpoint, for a guy like Jenkins, he should know the defense and should be ready to go. I mean, at this point, I think he's the better player. And maybe it makes Eli Apple a better player, but going to the playoffs, I got to believe Jenkins is opposite Lattimore.
There's no room for hurt feelings at this point.
No, you're playing to win.
You're playing to win, and there's a reason why they felt they could take a small gamble on Jenkins because Eli Apple's play had been dipping.
Yes.
And so they felt, all right, let's go get an insurance policy. It just happened to fall on their lap. It was Janoris Jenkins. And he's one of the leaders in the league in interceptions, one of the leaders in the league in pass defenses. And sorry, Eli Apple, if he's going to beat you out and we don't feel comfortable you playing the outside and him playing nickel because we'd rather have PJ or P-Rob play there, there's no room for hurt feelings.
No.
We apologize, but there's no room for apologies.
And
here.
again, that's one of the reasons why the Saints didn't pick up his option, 50-year option. They understood, first of all, it was an astronomical number. It would have put him among the top cornerbacks in the NFL in terms of salary. He wasn't worth that. And again, the possibility of maybe a dip down the line, or maybe coming at it from a different angle when you start talking about renegotiating that contract in the offseason. Bringing Jenkins in, even though he's got an $11 million cap hit next year, I mean, that, if the guys can shut down the opposite side of Lattimore, it's more than worth it at that point.
It would be worth the price for
Absolutely.
a one-year rental.
No
if
doubt.
you like Jenkins and he fits in well with you and he stays kind of, keeps his head out of the news and doing inappropriate, stupid things.
Right.
Then,
Stay off of Twitter.
Right. Stay off of Twitter. Just go forward, be with a winner. If he could do that, that price for 1 year would be well worth
You
it.
better believe it. The other thing is, again, when you start looking at the secondary, and I was impressed by what Lattimore had to say yesterday when he mentioned that the fact that it's on the secondary. The defensive line is going to do what they do. The linebackers will do what they do. But again, the secondary wins and loses games for this team, and we've seen that. We've seen explosive plays hurt this team and prevent them from winning games. I've never heard anyone on that secondary stand up and say that. He said that the other day. I took notice of it. I'm sure you did as well. Your thoughts?
Well, I think he can stand up and say that because maybe he's not the one necessarily giving
True.
up the big plays,
True.
but play up to his standard. I mean,
Right.
that's probably part of it. And look, Sean Payton had no problem calling out Marcus Williams a couple weeks ago.
And rightly so.
Right, exactly. They're losing on the back end. I mean, you
Right.
saw what happened against the 49ers. He's getting thrown down by George Kittle. And,
Right.
and we've seen bungles in the past. Sorry, but it's going to be played in your face. They're playing the Vikings, Minneapolis Miracle. It's going to be thrown in your face. And even though at times he played well this year, rightfully so. It's, again, the time for hurt feelings is over.
Right.
I mean, this is the team that could win the Super Bowl. And that's why they made these additions. And I mean, you're seeing someone like P.J. Williams. They trust him enough. All right, we're going to throw you in at safety, and played pretty well.
Yes, he did.
It's almost like you don't want to be caught in the snap right in your face in the moment.
Right.
But would you want to play P.J. Williams over Marcus Williams? Short term, results would probably tell you, yeah, but I don't know if they want to do that.
Right.
And Von Bell looks like he's coming back as well.
Which is a huge.
That's a big thing,
yes.
so you can have multiple pieces moving around. It's almost like, it's weird to say it, I feel like they have too many pieces now.
Right.
It's weird. Like,
No.
how's Dennis Allen going to juggle this?
But they've almost had to, because a lot of guys had not reached the expectations they thought that they were going to reach. And some of those guys, the progress has been slow. Some of it, again, they looked good early, but they've kind of come back to the pack a bit. And like you said, no hurt feelings here. You've got to be able to have guys that you can count on that back end. And that's been a problem at the safety position. I mean, for everything that we thought Marcus Williams was going to be coming out of college and really look good early, there's been a decline since the Minneapolis Miracle. He's not the same player. Now, maybe it's in his head. Whatever it is at this point, he's not. And look, as a safety, you're the last line of defense. We've seen it too many times, guys that are running free, where the first thing you're saying is, where's the safety?
Or you're seeing someone needs to make a tackle,
right,
and he just throws a shoulder at them.
Right.
Everyone's
Instead of wrapping
screaming
up.
like, "What are you doing? Why don't you wrap the guy up?" And so, trust me, I feel like Saints fans are kind of at their wits' end with him, and they felt bad for him after the Miracle, but we've seen almost 2 years now since then, and yet I don't know what they do. I assume he's going to start. Like, I just would assume so. I mean, it's his starting job. P.J. Williams has played safety for 2 games.
Right.
I assume he's going to come back and start, but if things are going awry, Sean Payton will be like, no, get out, and we're going to make a change if they give up a big play. And if they keep, say, Kirk Cousins in the game, there's no room for error, and they'll make a change and try to fix something.
Yes. Defensively, they've been playing well, though. I mean, again, since being called out by Sean Payton, they have really stepped up their game over the last few weeks.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And even after that game where they give up nearly a half, a 50 spot,
right,
and you lose Sheldon Rankins and you lose Marcus Davenport, I think that front has played well. They've gotten healthier now at linebacker. Their complete core is back. I think, again, like if they have to face a running team, say like the Vikings, they're going to use Dalvin Cook, there's no doubt.
Yes.
You put those guys in, they're more apt to stop the run. And I think that's a big piece to the puzzle. Malcolm Brown, he doesn't get talked about a lot, but he's been a difference maker there. No doubt. Shy Tuttle's played well. You mentioned Mario Edwards and all the younger defensive ends, but they've played pretty well too. And look, you get Von Bell, he's a good run stopper.
Right.
C.J. Gardner-Johnson's going to stick his nose in there. So I think they're more equipped now than, say, if they have to face Cook or an Aaron Jones in Green Bay or the group of backs against the 49ers. They're more equipped to handle that now than they were, say, a few weeks ago.
I would agree, because you mentioned it earlier when you mentioned Alonzo coming back, Klein coming back, along with Demario Davis, who got snubbed for the Pro Bowls, playing at an all-pro level. Again, that's one of the keys also to being able to stop the run. Those linebackers, they do a good job of it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, Demario Davis, I feel like could argue even over the last 2 years, he's the best free agent pickup in the NFL. It's really a bummer. You don't want to get caught up in Pro Bowls and things like that, but he's someone who deserves it. Like, really, him and Ryan Ramczyk, it's absurd.
It's crazy.
It's
I'll
really
throw
absurd.
Morstead in there as well.
Yeah, he's at least made it, and there's only one punter spot.
Sure.
But you've got to be able to not just vote in a bunch of middle linebackers. I mean, he's a weak side linebacker, every down guy. Plays the run, plays the pass. He's the best linebacker overall since Vilma.
Right.
And when you think about it, Vilma couldn't cover. You could argue Davis is better than Vilma.
Come on, are you kidding me? He could cover.
Absolutely.
And I've said on this show and the radio show that if he was back in New York doing this, everybody would know who he is.
Exactly.
The fact that he's here, even though, again, this is a prominent team and a team that's getting a lot of pub because, again, they're one of the top teams in the NFL, he doesn't get the publicity he would in a major market like New York.
And people think Cam Jordan, they think Marshawn Lattimore, they've been to Pro Bowls.
Right.
It's like once you get in once, you're in.
Yes.
Like Teron Armstead. He got in once, now he's in. Like, you need the same for Ramczyk. And, I mean, Ramczyk is going to be an All-Pro. Right. Like, he's going to be either a first or second team All-Pro. And he's probably going to beat Armstead out for that.
Right. Well, again, if you're honest about it, Armstead, okay, you got that basically is a reputation only. Ramczyk deserved to be able to be the guy in the Pro Bowl of any of the linemen that the Saints have. We'll see what happens down the line. Look, we all know you don't want any of the Saints at the Pro Bowl because you want to be in Miami for the Super Bowl when it's all said and done. Break this game down, Minnesota versus the Saints on Sunday.
I think Minnesota is going to try to run the ball They have to with Dalvin Cook. He's definitely their most potent weapon. I think the Saints can take that away. But also, if the Vikings are smart, they're going to try to take some shots with Diggs. And that's where, okay, the fact you have Janoris Jenkins there, he's capable of covering. And Adam Thielen hasn't been Adam Thielen this year. And I think the Saints will relish them having Kirk Cousins try to win the game against them. And I think the Saints are going to win by 17. You could do the math with however many points, whatever the score is. I think they can win by 17. And I think that's Saints getting up on them early. Their secondary of the Vikings isn't as good as it was. Alexander's hurt. Xavier Rhodes is not the same player he was. And I think they can attack it. And the fact that they have a weapon, not just Mike Thomas, but they have a Jared Cook, that helps. Kamara's playing great. At least 17. I'll put it that way. At least 17.
Yeah, I think they'll win. And of course, in the past, you'd be maybe a little fearful of having to go up to Green Bay and play up there. I don't think that's an issue for the Saints at all, because I think they're going to travel well. Let's shift gears. A lot of people upset about the final tally of the top 100 when they came down to the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. Look, the first snub was Ricky Jackson when it came to the linebackers on how he doesn't make the final list. The final list was Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas, Otto Graham, Sammy Baugh, John Elway, Peyton Manning, Roger Staubach, Dan Marino. A lot of people believe, myself included, that Brees should have been among that top 10. I've had people that I've read or listened to that have said about the Super Bowls. Only has one Super Bowl. Okay, well, if the Saints had New England's defense, half those rings that Brady has right now would probably be on Brees' fingers. So they've talked about the lack of NFL MVPs. In 2009, should have been his MVP. Peyton Manning got it. In 2011, should have been his MVP. Aaron Rodgers got it. We could talk about 2018, but again, by the end of the season, that belonged to Mahomes. It is what it is. So I could say maybe he got robbed from a couple MVPs that he should have rightly gotten. Where do you stand on this? You've seen Brees throughout his career here in New Orleans. I know it's just a list, but it is what it is. Is he worthy of being one of those top 10 quarterbacks when it's all said and done?
I mean, I'd put him in the top 5, to be honest with you.
There you go.
And yet, the list was made in mid-2018, so he hadn't passed Peyton Manning and Brett Favre for the yardage record. He hadn't passed him for the TDs. Maybe if the votes were today, they would look at those records and say, okay, he's still playing great, turns 41 in 2 weeks. Maybe that's differently. But also, you look at those lists and you have Otto Graham and Sammy Baugh and Roger Staubach, and they're a different era, and it's hard to juggle. And I don't get too worked up over the lists. I mean, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Yes. I mean, someone like Terry Bradshaw, was he on the list?
No, he wasn't.
And he won 4 Super Bowls. And Bart Starr and Aaron Rodgers, who has won a Super Bowl and has won an MVP, and will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But the fact that the voting happened when it did, and it took so long for this list to come out, I do think that played a negative effect for Drew. I do. I
will say this. There are some out there that say that Brees is going to be motivated by this. I say that he's known for months that he's not in the top 10. As you mentioned, this was done back in May of last year.
Right.
Okay. And they knew who got invited to the set, and they're not going to keep a secret like that among quarterbacks. They knew who had from this era made it. So again, I'm sure that he's played with a chip on his shoulder his entire career. I'm sure that didn't help, but it is kind of mind blowing when you talk about every quarterback from this point forward will be aspiring to break his records, but he's not there. I like what Richard Sherman said in an interview that he did about this, that it's unfair to be able to pick 10 guys from a certain position from over a 100-year period. It should be done either by decades or by era. And to me, that's a much more fair way of doing it.
Oh, I think absolutely. Rules change, this, that, and the other stats. They did their job. We're talking about it. So the NFL did their job. And part of that is part of that. And there's going to be snubs, and they knew it by making this list. And we're lending credence to the 100 years of the NFL. And So part of it, they did their job well, but still.
And then part of it, they did do their job because obviously they didn't just get this wrong. They got quite a few wrong. If you really look at it in the history of the NFL, what their voting was, what it was at that point. How you can't leave a guy in that's got every record out of the top 10.
Well, they didn't have him yet, and that's the problem. That's the problem with the voting when it was.
Right.
But I'm glad to know that we know when the voting happened.
Yes.
So I think that does give context to it. And what happens if it's year 101 and Breeze wins the Super Bowl and is a Super Bowl MVP again and he's got 2?
Right.
Oh, can we tear it up? I mean,
right.
Does he make it in year 200?
Right, the next 200.
Right,
exactly. We're going to make up for the last one.
Right, exactly.
Right, no doubt. The other big story that got a lot of people talking was Antonio Brown getting a workout with the Saints. Again, I found it interesting as we kind of dove into this. You've written about it, other people have written about it. The fact that he brought his entourage with him, he brought a camera crew with him. He was asked not to do this. And then he, again in typical Antonio Brown fashion, this is a publicity stunt on his part. Instead of coming here trying to put the work in, trying to see if maybe the Saints are going to maybe bring him on for a chance to be able to be on a Super Bowl team. He turns around and says that it was just a publicity stunt when he realizes that he's not going to be signed by the Saints. Look, from what I know about the Saints and Sean Payton, this thing was over as soon as he brought the camera crew. He was done.
Right, because they told him not to.
Because they told him not to.
And of course, my colleague Jay Glazer, who does work at The Athletic, he broke that story, and guess what? And you know who's telling him that story, and you know it's Sean Payton.
Sean Payton, no doubt.
And so you look at that, and I just said it immediately as soon as I saw the workout. Just say no. My same advice to drugs, just say no.
Right.
And I think people just lose their minds. They don't realize who this guy is. They just get enamored. Oh my gosh, he's this great player, and he's a great player. And he didn't just say it was his publicity stunt. He tried to say it was for the Saints.
Right.
That's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard.
Right.
They don't need any publicity about you. Who cares? You need them. They don't need you.
It's the second coming of Junior Gillette all over again. I mean,
he's way worse.
But I mean, look at it.
Way worse.
He's a guy that was an undrafted free agent, same way as Brown. Worked their way up to stardom. In his case, he's superstardom. Okay, and then whether it be Instagram posts, whether it be sexual assault, stuff off the field, again, blow their career, blow it wide open to the point that you become untouchable. Tomlin couldn't handle him. Gruden couldn't handle him. Belichick couldn't handle him. I mean, so at this point, what is his option? He won't go to Canada, but yet he won't leave the Instagram and the social media alone. It's all about AB. It's all about Antonio Brown. And he's become a cartoon character now at this point. And not a guy that, unless you're really desperate, you want to really bring him into a locker room where you have a chance to be able to win something.
Well, the Saints are not that desperate.
They're not.
No, and they took a small risk, say, with Janoris Jenkins. This is way too big of one, and he would just... this would continue because if you sign him, you're enabling him, saying this is okay if you're going to do it. And I've known Mickey Loomis for a long, long time, and I just don't think as soon as that happened, he's like, no, and that's the end of the conversation.
Right. No doubt about it. Larry Holder of The Athletic is with us. When we come back, we'll talk a bit about LSU. We'll talk about Tulane. We'll get into some other things, your phone calls as well. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Don't go anywhere.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Larry Holder is our guest tonight. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Let's go to LSU again. As we know, SEC champs, number one in the final college in the second to last college football playoff poll. Number one in the AP, number one in the coaches poll. Absolutely demolished Oklahoma, 63-28. They'll now take on Clemson in the Superdome on January 13th in the college football playoff championship. Again, will be a formidable foe in Clemson. But let's talk about, first of all, the game against Oklahoma. Larry, I got to tell you, right, this reminds me, and I've been talking about it a lot on the radio show, almost like this offense emulates the Saints when they were really going, the first few years of Peyton, when it was shock and awe. When you knew when they took the field, they were going right down the field on you, whether they're going to throw the ball, run the ball, whatever it was going to be. And before you knew it, again, you were in a catch-up mode. And then if you look at it for the next step, how that kind of changed the NFC South, where, again, now teams had to be able to, almost in an arms race, either try to match what the Saints were doing on offense or, again, try to figure out a defense that could slow this offense down, and then also really around the NFL. What they're doing right now at LSU it reminds me a lot of those first few years of Peyton and Breeze here in New Orleans, where that offense was unstoppable and teams just didn't have an answer for it.
And when you do this against Oklahoma and they take away Jamar Chase, they doubled him.
Yes.
There was no Clyde Edwards-Helaire for all intents and purposes. He was in there basically to block. He touched the ball maybe once or twice, didn't do much. And you have all of these weapons just working. And Joe Burrow even said it today. There was a conference call, and he says, I basically have 5 pros on the field, and not every play is necessarily designed for that person. I can go read to read to read to read. It's exactly what Drew Brees has done within this offense, and Joe Brady took it with him. Mm-hmm. And there's probably only, I'd say, one quarterback in college football who could handle that offense, and it's Joe Brady. Right. I mean, Joe Burrow. And so when you add all of that up, it is really remarkable to watch. And it's been consistent. Low-level teams, top-tier teams, they put it to everyone. And look, I haven't watched Clemson a ton this year, but I don't think their defense is probably as good as someone like Auburn, and they kept it close. And LSU squandered some opportunities against Auburn. That score could have been bigger.
Yes.
And so I just don't see how Clemson is going to find a way to stop everybody on the field. It's remarkable.
Yeah. No, it really is. And, I mean, I don't know if you see, I'm sure you do, you see the same thing I see. I mean, I can look at some of the plays they run, and I'm going, that's a Saints play. That's a Saints play. I mean, it's over and over again. And then you mentioned something. You know, the ability to be able to read defenses and go through your progressions and understand where a player is going to be, because this is a complicated offense, not just for the quarterback, but also for the pass catchers as well. What you have to do based on what the defense, how the defense is playing you, and they played it flawlessly this year.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny when you think of quarterbacks and their preparation time, and maybe this is going to be rare, but you basically have someone who's taking one online class and he's there to play football, and he's working a pro schedule as far as preparation and film study and age. Look, he's not young.
Right.
So in that sense, it's different. In the other sense, the offense, no one knows the intricacies of the Saints offense. Joe Brady brought it with him.
Yes.
And so you mash that together, that rare combination, and it shows it's pros versus college kids. Like that, and yet even though the kids are still in college, it is pros versus college. Like that's just the way it is.
It really looks like it. And look, some have said, well, Dabo Swinney and Venables are going to have a couple weeks to prepare for this offense. See, I think it's going to take a couple seasons for teams in college to be able to adjust to what's going on with this offense, just like it took a few seasons for other teams in the NFL to be able to catch up on what this offense was doing with the Saints.
Well, I think it's going to matter who comes after Burrow.
Agreed.
So if you
in
don't
terms
have
of the quarterback,
right,
you need
exactly.
the quarterback. I would agree.
You need the quarterback. It's that rare combination, because not everyone can be Drew Brees within this offense.
True.
Teddy was Drew Brees-like for one game when he had the big game against Tampa. Otherwise, he wasn't dashing, and he's a viable starting quarterback in the NFL. So you need the quarterback. It is really just a generational combination that they've run into.
But this is also for the first time in my lifetime where I think you'll start to see quarterbacks that want to go to LSU because they want to run this offense, because they understand running this offense, what it means for them in terms of being a pro prospect.
I also wonder, because Joe Brady's not going to be there forever.
True.
I'm sure you leave the playbook behind, but someone's got to know how to use the playbook.
Right.
And so
there's a team right downriver where you might be able to pull, one of the assistants from there as well.
maybe so, but still, it's certainly it's a question for that.
Larry, we've talked about it over and over again about Joe Brady. Nobody really knew who Joe Brady was. I mean, Joe Brady obviously has brought that Saints offense.
I
with
knew
him.
Joe Brady because his just name was on the list. I'd never spoken to the guy.
And you're at the facility every day.
Right.
Every day. So it goes to show you if you're a top football mind, which obviously he is, and you understand the concepts of this offense and you've been drilled in it, much like he was, there's an ability for Orgeron to maybe tap into someone else or, again, someone else on that staff to kind of learn what's going on here. There's no doubt about it. This may be, again, one of those one-in-a-million type seasons, but I don't think it's a situation where if Joe Brady leaves, all of a sudden they can't run this offense anymore. Because, again, there's other people within that have been disciples of Peyton that know that offense. We've seen Lombardi bring it over to Detroit, maybe not have the type of success that Peyton has had. But, again, there are other guys out there that can coach this offense.
Oh, for sure. But like I said, you do need the quarterback.
Yes,
and
I would agree.
Who knows if Miles Brennan's going to be that later. Max Johnson.
Right.
TJ Finley.
Or a graduate transfer.
Or someone else like that.
Right.
You don't know.
Who would like to come in. Clyde Edwards-Helaire looks like he's going to be back. That's huge for this team, despite the fact what Curry did against Oklahoma.
I was impressed with Curry.
Too.
I mean, he's different. You kind of see that bulldozing style with the hair, and I kept thinking, man, he's like Chris Ivory. Like he just that's kind of what I kept thinking. I was like, man, he's kind of like Chris Ivory, just bulldozing people, and you wonder how long that could last. But still, I thought that was a good way of using him within the offense. Obviously, he's not going to be able to catch as many passes and things like that, but they didn't need him to. I mean, Justin Jefferson was open, Thaddeus Moss, Terrace Marshall, you name it. But I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's a different animal. I mean, he could do it all. And
You surprised?
By him, absolutely.
I mean, look, I didn't see that last year, and I was one of the ones that was talking about the freshmen have to step up. They need a dynamic player like a Kamara. When you look at him, he's kind of like Sproles, right?
He's kind of a bowling ball kind of guy. He's a little thicker than Sproles. He's like a bowling ball.
Right.
It's almost like if Mark Ingram could do all of that stuff. That kind of reminds me of that.
Yes.
And he's more fluid than Mark and being able to catch the football. And look, without him, you're not to this point.
I agree.
He's such a difference maker. He's Kamara to the Saints, like Clyde Edwards. Like it's just different when you have that rare talent. It's just a real big difference maker.
And the offensive line, a lot of question marks about this offensive line coming into the season. I remember talking about this show and the radio show. Do you have the ability to coach up a 2- and 3-star players to compete with 4- and 5-star linemen over time? And that question was out there again last year. I think they answered that question this year because those guys have gotten better each and every year they've been in the program.
Yeah, look, Damian Lewis, probably their best offensive lineman, had a great year. Probably not going to be playing. He got his ankle rolled up. But Ed Ingram is a starter in the SEC, right. So they're fortunate there. Adrian McGee's played well. Deculus, I've always been shaky with Sadiq Charles. He's fine, and Lloyd Cushenberry's a veteran, so it's like you at least had a veteran group to figure this thing out. And when it does get leaky, the fact that Joe Burrow is elusive, he's not a statue back there, I mean, that is a difference. Like, you've got to be able to move in the pocket, especially in college football, because techniques break down and this, that, and the other. So the fact, you add all that up, and I know they won the best offensive line in the college football award. I think it's because of what the offense was able to do. I don't think prospects-wise, I don't think they're all going to be NFL first-round picks.
But we were looking at a team last year, this offensive line, that got dominated by Alabama. They got dominated by big-time programs. That was not the case this year.
Yeah, they were able to hold up against Auburn, and I would say that was the best front that they played. They have NFL prospects.
Right.
Derek Brown,
yes,
incredible.
No doubt.
And so they held up in that game, and I don't think Clemson has that. Alabama didn't have that. So they're almost fortunate, I feel like, this year that there wasn't these necessarily dominant defensive fronts like we've seen for so many years with Alabama and some other schools.
Big difference has been down the stretch here, the play of the defense. Getting healthy along the defensive line, Delpit getting healthy, but also, again, the play of the defense. And Aranda kind of figuring out a little bit about what he has. You've been at the games, you've been in the locker room. Talk about this defense.
Yeah, like I've covered the last 3 weeks, and it's the best 3 weeks this entire season for LSU. A&M, Kellen Mond looked scared. Jake Fromm, under 50% passing. Jalen Hurts, under 50% passing. And you mentioned the health. Look, Rashard Lawrence, he's playing his best football right now. He's healthy, and he's looked the best I've seen him in his career. Kayvon Chason, I think he's the big difference maker. He's healthy. They're able to move him around, pass rush. They don't know where he's coming from. He's either getting a sack or he's getting a hurry. I mean, he's really springboarding his way. Draft stock is going to jump. And you mentioned on the back end, Delpit, he's healthy again. The ankle spine, he even talked about it today. He said he's full go. You could see on the field he's full go.
Yes.
And you're adding pieces like Maurice Hampton. They're finding some roles for him.
He's really played well.
They're finding some roles for him. Of course, your corners, you feel good about them. Even Kerry Vincent, sometimes he can be shaky, but healthy again. Made a pick last week. Right. He's playing well. I think like every level. And, oh, by the way, you're getting Michael Divinity back off suspension. Sounds like he's just going to be in pass rush situations, but that's what you want him for. So if you have him and Chase on, Trevor Lawrence, that flowing, beautiful hair of yours, you might be flopping in the wind. You never know.
Well, we'll talk about it. Talk about the Clemson offense against this LSU defense.
Like, they are battle tested. I mean, when you have a guy who's won a national championship, I mean, it's certainly something that you've got to take and look and say, all right. And they went and beat Ohio State. Ohio State is a very good team.
Yes.
And so the fact that he has kind of the same mettle as Joe Burrow, that's who you're going against. Maybe not as prolific, but same mettle, same toughness, same this and that, who's been there and won it against Alabama and a team that they didn't think would beat them. And so I think that the fact that LSU's defense gets to practice against Joe Burrow every day, I think that helps them going within this game. But I just think LSU's defense is peaking at the right time, and I don't see Clemson as this offensive juggernaut, but don't let ATN get going.
Better not. Yeah. Right. And they got big, fast receivers as well.
Absolutely.
And look, Lawrence is going to be the first overall pick in the draft when he does come out. So again, and look, he's never lost a game as a collegiate. On the flip side, let's talk about that LSU offense versus that Clemson defense. Remember, they lost a lot of really good players to the draft last year. They still got some left over, but it's not the Clemson defense we saw last year.
No, and I feel like that's part of, we're kind of in the universe of, wow, all right, the stars are aligning a little bit because Clemson's always had a good defensive front and they've lost some players to the draft. Alabama usually the same, and sort of the same way, and it's almost like it's all aligned for LSU to just go in and take care of it. And like I said, they don't have 3 stud corners like LSU has 3 stud receivers or someone to defend Thaddeus Moss. You mix and match all this, and LSU is going to be so hard to beat.
I would agree.
Especially in the dome.
Right, because again, this whole city is going to be purple and gold. I mean, Clemson's going to have a nice contingent of fans that come down here, but the entire state of Louisiana will be down here in New Orleans for that game. Before we go to the phone lines, Tulane taking on Southern Miss in the Armed Forces Bowl. That's on Saturday in Fort Worth. One of the great things about this game is Tulane's had 5 weeks to prepare for this, which means 5 weeks of bowl practices. And there was a report yesterday that said that Fritz has been bringing on a lot of his younger players and allowing those guys to be able to get a chance to be able to get practice, to get some time. This really helps the program going forward. But this is against a team that has been one of their natural rivals for a long, long time. It's a nice matchup with USM and Tulane. Your thoughts?
Well, it was definitely an attractive matchup because Tulane didn't think that they would be going there. And so once they heard they were going to Fort Worth, a good potential base to get some recruiting and some publicity in Fort Worth, taking on Southern Miss, a good natural rival. But I do think that Willie Fritz understands and the program understands, all right, this past 6-6 was not last year's 6-6. And they lost momentum. Even though National Signing Day, the early period, they had one of their best classes they've ever had. I mean, I think it was 20 some odd 3-stars. That's huge.
And Fritz says he thought it was the best class ever at Tulane.
It could be.
Right.
And they got kids locally. They got kids across the country. Like, the program is moving, and there's a contract extension for Willie Fritz. Because teams were flirting with him. He's told me it wasn't very serious, but serious enough to kind of get the ball rolling. Troy Dannon would want to have him be their coach until Willie just wants to give up coaching. Like, that's how much they value him, and they feel like he's bringing the program in the right direction. So I feel like winning this game, certainly some momentum. They've already got momentum with the signing class. I'm curious about the quarterback next year. So it's more, to me, I'd like to see some of these young players to see what they can do and maybe a glimpse of next year, because 7-6, 6-7, okay, that's great. I mean, I'm curious to see if there's who are the bright spots we're going to be seeing moving forward.
And I do think that, again, a win is necessary because you want to be able to have that winning season and back-to-back bowl wins for the psyche of the program as well. And also remember, again, just for future recruits down the line, and maybe a graduate transfer or two that may be looking at Tulane down the line
maybe
here as well.
Maybe a quarterback, exactly. Just like Justin McMillan.
Which is, I think, the route they may go. All right, let's head to the phone lines. Let's see who's up first. Let's go to Michael in Metairie. Michael, welcome. Hey, Michael.
Hey, guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I was in shock, just like you, when I heard that Demario Davis was not picked for the Pro Bowl. They had like 10 linebackers. One of the great minds in the NFL was on today, Greg Cosell, and he was shocked also. Demario not only is the team leader, he's a tremendous tackler. You can watch YouTube from last year. He's an incredible cover linebacker. He might be the best in the league on that. And he's also a great blitzer, so how they passed on him. I could understand about Ramczyk or even about Drew, because the top 10 were picked by decade, and the two this decade were Brady and Peyton. So I can understand how they passed on him. One question I had for your guest is, the biggest defensive hole, the hole on the whole team, is the defensive secondary. Jalen Ramsey, one of the best in the league, was available in mid-season. The Rams signed him. I didn't hear a word about the Saints trying to get him. What happened there?
All right. Thank you for the phone call, Michael. That was about the ability to have draft picks, right?
They don't have the assets.
They're
not going to be trading a player, and the Saints don't have the assets to do it, and so that's part of it. I could tell you, around the trade deadline, though, they were fishing around more for a wide receiver or a tight end rather than cornerback help. The fact that Jenkins was available on the waiver wire when he was, it kind of just fell in their lap.
And the fact that he fell to the Saints, and the Saints are so far down on the waiver wire, that's the thing that shocked me more than anything else.
Well, I think other teams figured, well, we didn't want to deal with the trouble, this, that, and the other.
And the $11 million for next year as well.
But they're not on the hook for that.
Right.
They can let that go. Would they call around? Maybe they called around about Jalen Ramsey, sure, but the price was going to be way too high.
Same thing for Fitzpatrick.
Right, Minka Fitzpatrick
Same
as
thing
well.
there.
Yes.
Again, the price was too high.
Yes.
Toby is in Gretna. Toby, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Toby.
Hey, Eric. I can't remember. Was Eli Apple in on the nickel packages? And I thank you.
Nickel.
Yeah, Eli Apple was every down.
Right.
Like, he was an every down guy. He played on the outside. He doesn't shift inside, but he was an every down guy. And so if he were to play and you try to play Janoris Jenkins can play the nickel if you want to play all of them all at once, but do you take out P.J. Williams? Do you take out Patrick Robinson? To do that, I think that's something they have to juggle. But yeah, Eli Apple was an every down corner on the outside.
And Jenkins can do that as well.
Yes.
I mean, again, he's done that throughout his career.
He's been an all-pro.
Right, whether it was the Rams or the Giants.
Right.
No doubt. And as you mentioned earlier, and I wish you'd reiterate this, has had a great year this year.
He has 5 interceptions. He's top 10 in interceptions, top 10 in pass defenses before he came to the Saints, and he added a 5th pick this past week.
Not even, and remember, a couple weeks ago, got thrown into the mix, just said go play man-to-man.
Right.
So, I mean, that tells you a lot about him as well. Tom is in Metairie. Tom, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Tom.
Hey, guys. I want to make a comment about the Saints and LSU. I don't want to pile on Marcus Williams, but what concerned me is that 49er, that last play, in lieu of trying to tackle him, he immediately grabs the guy's face mask, trying to prevent the Minnesota Miracle again. So that really concerns me. If he's the guy that we lose this game again, I don't know how he lasts as a Saint. And then my second question, I guess, to you guys is about LSU, about closing out the game. If you think back of a couple of tight games at LSU, the defense just let them score, the onside kicks, and that's what concerns me about Clemson, how they came back on Ohio State and won the game. So see what you guys think about that, and I'll hang up.
Okay.
I mean, Marcus Williams is grabbing out of desperation because George Kittle could basically throw him.
Right.
It was almost like, it reminded me of beast mode.
I
Marshawn
swear
Lattimore
it did.
throwing Tracy
Yes.
Porter like twice.
Right.
So he's doing this out of desperation
Yes.
because he's like, I got no chance of pulling this guy down. But like I said, I think that's just one voice of a lot of voices who are getting tired of Marcus Williams. And
Right.
like, the time is now, or guess what? We're going to move on with somebody else. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, P.J.
Right.
Williams, hey, whoever. If you can't cut it,
There's another guy to
Exactly.
step in, no doubt. As far as closing games out, I think the defense played well over the last 3 weeks for the LSU Tigers, that they can close a game out. Plus, the scores have been, astronomical. It should be a closer game against Clemson, but I think the defense is up to the task.
But offensively, LSU closed out Texas on the road, and they closed out Alabama.
Right.
After Alabama scored to make it 46-41, offense got the ball back, first downs, closed the game out, and they when Alabama was striking, LSU's offense came back and counterpunched.
Greg is in Metairie. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg. Greg with us?
Yeah, I'm in Folsom, not in Metairie.
That's okay. Greg, what's your question?
How did Green Bay get the second seed when we didn't even play them? We played Chicago, but they're saying that we didn't get the second seed because of conference game.
I'll let Larry explain that. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, in a three-way tie, it doesn't come down to head-to-head. And so, let's see, San Francisco 13-3, Green Bay 13-3, and the Saints are 13-3, and it goes by conference records as far as within the NFC. And those teams had better conference records than the Saints.
Yep.
And that was it. That's the tiebreaker. So they had one more loss within the conference than Green Bay and San Francisco.
Right.
If it would have come heads up, head-to-head, the Saints would have lost to Green Bay if it was between 1 and 2 because of conference record, because they didn't play head-to-head. And if it was head-to-head against San Francisco, Saints would have lost that if it was those two were tied because of the head-to-head match.
Right. Just for those that may be tuning in a little bit late, you like the Saints this weekend against the Minnesota Vikings?
I do. I keep saying 17. I'm going to say they win by 17 points.
And, of course, we won't have you back on the TV show by this time, but Monday the 13th, LSU Clemson. Talk about that game before we leave.
I think Clemson is going to be in for an awakening.
Yes.
Might be rude. I just think that LSU's offense is playing like no one else that we've seen maybe in the history of college football. I mean, you can never say that about Trevor Lawrence. That's never happened either. And I do feel like LSU's defense is peaking at the right time. It's something I wrote about that came out earlier today on The Athletic, and especially these last 3 games. It's their best 3 games against A&M and against Georgia and against Oklahoma. These aren't like Georgia Southern and Northwestern State.
Yes.
I mean, these are big-time schools with players you would think can hang. So Clemson's a little different animal for sure, but I think LSU wins by 14.
Right. And finally, Tulane taking on Southern Miss this Saturday in the Armed Forces Bowl.
I think Tulane gets off the schneid, losing 5 of their last 6. I think they finish this season with a win.
We agree all the way around. Larry Holder of The Athletic. Make sure you go and check out The Athletic. Get a subscription there. You'll catch Larry again, columnist writing about, again, Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, everything. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Got it, E.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also, on Pelican Sports Television. That's 9 p.m. every Friday night. You can catch it on the WLAE YouTube channel if you want to catch it there. Or again, I also post it on our social media platforms as well as ericasher.com. Catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2, and the iHeartRadio app. That is noon to 2 weekdays. Listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. And again, as I mentioned, all the previous episodes of this program also at ericasher.com. I want to thank our fantastic underwriters for supporting this program. Also our guests, Larry Holder, and also the WLA production staff, Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Naila Jones, Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.